much time with the author. I can Google it. I can find out information. I know the background. It's arguably the most unsuccessful Googling attempt to find out about an author I've ever had. Dr. Kfir, I know you went to grad school and you have a doctorate. I know you were the former director of the School of Special Operations for Mossad. Other than that, your background is somewhat mysterious, which certainly adds intrigue to what we're going to hear about today. But the book itself is a story that a lot of us are familiar with to a degree, whether you've seen the movie Munich or you know the background of Operation Wrath of God. You have some insight into it, and I thought so too before I picked the book up. It goes deeper than anything I've seen before, and it really only can do that with someone who was there. And that's the real advantage of a book like this, is it's about as horse's mouth as you can get. And so I don't want to keep hearing myself talk, and I certainly don't think you do either. So without any further ado, let me please welcome Dr. Kfir, and thank you for coming to the National Spy Museum.
Thank you. For Sylvia, her family and friends, what is written in Psalm 6, verse 6, does not hold true for them. For in death there is no remembrance of thee. In the netherworld, who will give thee thanks? I may assume that in the small hall here, there are some heroes, but not many who will be remembered as Sylvia will be remembered. I took upon myself the modest task of telling the story of Sylvia, a woman name that has become a legend. How did I become a writer? And you will have to decide whether I am a writer or not. But meanwhile, it was my co-author, Ram Oren, initiative who suggested that I will write a Mossad story. It took me over 3 years to surrender. When I started to learn French, I remember the first book introduced to me a phrase in French, impossible, ce n'est pas français, which means there is no impossible in the French language. I adopted it along the years, even here. Not without hesitation, I moved from thick darkness into blinding light. In face of the Israeli law and procedure, I underwent a conscious spiritual change. Whoever has been a former state employee and who wishes to write a book about his former occupation must receive authorization from the censor and a ministerial committee dealing with matter of publication. I conducted negotiation for almost a year, resulting in a compromise between myself and the security regulator. I am a former member of a Mossad. The adjective former is a humble award granted by society and state to those who were, to those who did. The book Sylvia is a biography of a clandestine combatant. It required from the author remembering events and persons from the distant past, disclosing their interesting, sometimes intimate, sometimes even piquant, personal stories without infringing on individuals' right to privacy. Revealing events involving state secrets without endangering national security. Deciding at which point yesterday's secret become tomorrow's anecdote, and distinguishing between secrets that will remain so forever and those that are time and space dependent and are a constant matter of contention between the writer and the regulator. Succeeding in relating a gripping narrative based on cold, hard facts, but not skipping the human angle, resulting in a work that is somewhere between a historical account and a romantic novel. Finally, but not less important, never forget that you, the writer, is not the hero of your narrative. Some definitions: spy. Two types of spies are included in this category: those who, on behalf of their country, are sent to enemy land to perform certain missions, and those who are traitors to their own countries. Our story deals with the first category. We do not use the term spy, but the term clandestine combatant. Sylvia Rafael was one of these. I will not deal here with the basic necessary technical skills such as language, profession, passport, etc., but with the human, psychological, and intellectual qualities demanded by this profession. I would rather say it is more craft and art occupation. In our case, it is a very ambivalent issue. From time of immemorial, lies were basic human survival tools, but one that was frowned upon by society. A liar has never been an honorary degree. The Ten Commandments state, "Thou shalt not bear false witness." In our parents' home, in kindergarten, and in school, lies were punished and liars ostracized. Of course, who is late? My family is late. However, lies are the basic stock in trade of any intelligence organization. What they require are gifted performers who lie to entire world, but never to those who send them. Absolutely different scale of values. In the light of day, but in darkness, exactly describes the world of a clandestine combatant. Cover story. The cover story must include a combination of personality, age, language, profession, hobbies, and the result must allow the clandestine combatant to achieve goals and maintain a high level of personal security. The cover story is constructed by the intelligence agency in coordination and conjunction with the person who is to assume it. Courage. Courage is a human quality that makes it possible to cope with fear, pain, danger, and uncertainty. Soldiers require courage for a relatively short period of time and almost always operate as part of a group. Clandestine combatants require courage for extended time period. Furthermore, they are often in a state of loneliness, even when they are not physically alone. In this context, there is a vast difference between being alone and being lonely. Intelligence organizations are in need of courageous people who can exercise discretion in changing circumstances sometimes are not foreseen. In analogy, the clandestine combatant is permanently on a battlefield even while sleeping. Very often, a clandestine combatant is at the same time a soldier and a general, having to make great decisions. Not many of us were blessed with this quality. Motivation. One should remember that Israel is in a permanent state of war. In light of this geopolitical reality, the Mossad became the long arm of the State of Israel. Analyzing the personality of a potential combatant is always an enigma. A human being is a complex creation. A clandestine combatant is much more. Clandestine practice involves life and death, a fact that should be always be remembered. It takes professional expertise, time, and long observation to discover the real motivation of a prospective candidate. And it is always more than one motivation. It is a combination of motivations. Allow me to confess, sometimes I myself was wrong in identifying motivation of a candidate. The conscious of having a mission means that clandestine combatants do not live their lives randomly or in quest after self-realization. They are dispatched by a person or an entity on a mission that makes their lives meaningful. It may be said that what makes a candidate good combatant is a balance between conflicting qualities. For example, courage versus recklessness. Striving towards a goal versus discretion. Demonstrate openness versus guarding personal security. An extroverted and yet secretive person. Persistence versus head against wall. An optimal balance between these conflicting qualities is essential to make a successful clandestine combatant. In clandestine activity, there is a built-in conflict between intelligence, law, and morals. The only way to reduce the level of conflict is to recruit and to enlist the best. Sylvia was one of those. Sylvia left us on February 2005. She was a unique character, if only because of her seemingly conflicting identities, which were part of her until the last day. Christian and Jewish, Israeli and South African. Probably very few were privileged to be buried twice. Sylvia was cremated in South Africa, her ashes laid to rest in Israel. She received a traditional Jewish burial in the military section of cemetery at Kibbutz Ramat HaKovesh, as was her wish. It is symbolic that the way she lived was the way she was buried, in two different countries, two different homelands. Born in 1937 in South Africa to a non-Jewish mother and a Jewish father, immigrated to Israel as a young woman. Canadian Patricia Roxburgh, an attractive, loved, and loving who also conducted operation behind the capabilities of most men. An adventurous, in a way, figure who also performed painstaking, monotonous tasks. A sense of humor is a godsend. Sylvia was blessed with this quality, which is an efficient and very useful working tool in clandestine activities during tense time and in time of relaxation. In her last few months, she wrote a letter to a colleague. I quote few sentences from Sylvia's letter. I can now tell you that there is the plus and the minus to cancer. I may die bald, but I have gone from size 16 to size 11. Have never had such a great figure. I have 3 wigs which look so good that I may become a Jewish, very religious woman. I never have a bad hair day. End of quote. I am the one that should be blamed for bringing Sylvia to the Mossad ranks. It was the beginning of the 60s that I first met her. After a few discreet meetings, I got the impression that Sylvia is a potential candidate. She underwent a series of tests, and the recommendation was to put her through training period. She spent successfully and alone over 1 year of training. Then she was based in Paris. France at that time was a close ally and the best friend of the country of Israel. After about 6 months, she moved to Canada in order to become Canadian and to adopt the identity and the passport of Patricia Roxburgh. Back to Paris, under the cover story of photojournalist. She got herself a freelance job at a press photographs agency named Dalmas. Her cover story was as close as possible to perfect and enabled her to achieve the Mossad missions. Sylvia was active in various tasks in different countries, including enemy countries. In 1972, in Munich Olympics, 11 Israeli athletes were massacred by a Palestinian Black September terrorist group. The government of Israel decided to hunt down the murderers. The assignment was given to a special unit of the Mossad. Sylvia was a member of this unit. In 1973, Lillehammer, a small town in Norway, a hit team of this unit killed an innocent man, mistaking him for Ali Hassan Salameh, a Black September high-ranking leader responsible for the massacre of the 11 Israeli athletes. The members of the team, including Sylvia, were apprehended, tried and sentenced for 5 years imprisonment. Released after 2.5 years, Sylvia married her Norwegian lawyer, which is a worse separate story. Next visit, please take a note. The couple left Norway and lived in South Africa till her last day. At the end of my speech, I want to thank my faith that brought me to the Mossad, very meaningful years, and allowed me to meet special people. One of them was Sylvia Rafael. That's it.
Thank you again. So at the end of the Q&A session, Dr. Kfir would be happy to sign books. We got his book in the back. But first, I want to open up for questions. I have a couple myself, but we'll see if anyone else has any questions. Now, please, if you do, wait for Amanda to have a microphone so we can pick it up on the video. Oh, then I will start. I'm perfectly fine with that. How much of a relationship did you have with Sylvia after her Norwegian jail time when she moved to South Africa? Was that you versus, or the Mossad? Was there a complete separation? Or what can you say about that potentially?
No, it was not a separation at all. She tried at the beginning to settle in Israel with her husband, and they haven't succeeded for different reasons. I met her, I believe, along the year 10 times. Often she came visiting Israel, friends, and above all, the kibbutz that adopted her while she was in prison.
Yes, I'll go with yours.
Thank you very much for the talk. I had a question. As I was mentioning to the gentleman to my left, I had read a previous book about Ali Hassan Salameh, written by Kfir, called The Good Spy, which is also back there. And apparently he's a very controversial character. And my question gets into the relationship between what you were all doing and what the U.S. intelligence agencies were doing post-Munich, and whether you had connectivity with the U.S. spy agency, and if not, why not, and if so, why? And particularly because Salameh is written up quite extensively in The Good Spy, and actually is written up in a more favorable light relative to his connections to possible negotiations with Yasser Arafat. So you may want to comment on that as well.
I'll try. Are you suggesting that Ali was a CIA agent?
There are some people who think he was.
I'm hesitating whether to deny or confirm. Not to embarrass the host. He was kind of connection between CIA and Arafat, and probably more than that. Ali Salameh was a terrorist already second generation. His father, Hassan Ali Salameh, was a close member of the Mufti of Jerusalem of the 30s, the one that fight against the British mandate. Ali Hassan Salameh, his father, was trained in Germany by the army intelligence and was dropped with 3 German citizens of Palestine near Jericho in the desert, dropped by parachute. There is a dispute whether what was the real mission. We grew up with the idea that their mission was to poison water source, supplying water to Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. And they were exposed very early by the British army. The Germans were arrested. He managed to escape somehow. So he was brought in a village near the airport, Tel Aviv airport, and from very early days, he adopted the hatred toward the Jews, toward Zionism. I hope somehow I answered your question.
Can I just repeat the question, if it's okay? And that gets back to the relationship between Mossad and maybe this mission and what the U.S. intelligence agency might have been up to at about the same time. That was really the core of the question.
I'm not qualified to elaborate on the relationship. No doubt, and thanks God that there are good, profound relations. There are, I believe, certain coordination, and I believe that there is a certain independence that each side keeps for himself.
Less specifically, but on the same track as that question, when you were director of the School of Special Operations, how much coordination did you have with your counterpart at CIA or at NSA? Was there any?
No,
Okay.
I have not.
When Sylvia was captured for this murder, were they tried and convicted of espionage, or was it a simple
For
murder?
murder.
I'm sorry?
For murder,
For murder. Not, she was never revealed as being a
No.
spy at that point.
No.
Hi, good afternoon. Hopefully I don't steal too much thunder from your book, but I was curious, you said that she came to your attention, and I was wondering, did she volunteer, or was she in mandatory military service and she was identified as a candidate? How did she come to be trained?
the real story is very non-dramatic. One of the school crew had a girlfriend that hired an apartment with a partner. Sylvia was a partner of her. The chap visited his girlfriend and he came back to me whispering, I have seen a lady, she might, because A and B and C, she might be a candidate. And from there on, I took over, and as I have described, found her with potential qualities. And she served from 61 to 75, including jail.
How much headhunting was what word we would use here? How much recruiting was done overseas? I mean, obviously Israel is easier to recruit within the country itself, but did you have, I mean, I know without saying more than you can say, how much were people on the lookout for?
I cannot speak on behalf of the Mossad as a whole. There are sections. There are sections that do it overseas, and there are sections that do it elsewhere. This unit, this special unit, mainly recruited Israelis and Jews, not Americans, because of the mutual agreement.
Hi there. Sorry, I didn't read the book yet, but I'm interested in the Canadian aspect. Why was Canada chosen as a spot to change her identity?
Can you repeat loudly?
Oh, sorry, Canada. Why was Canada chosen to set up a new identity?
For several reasons. First of all, you should ask why not to use her South African passport and identity. You have to remember that at that time, South Africa was under apartheid. And to move with a South African passport everywhere, including Arab countries, was more complicated than to move with an Israeli passport. Second reason, Canada became an immigration country for whites from South Africa. So it gave her and us the excuse of not speaking pure Canadian English. And number three, and not less important, or number four, technically, and I believe it's today as well, it's relatively easy to handle Canadian passport. And above all, Canada is a very friendly country. And in case of disasters, always stood behind.
Oh,
Are you Canadian?
Along those same lines, did I read it right that the identity she assumed was actually a person who existed in the real world as
Yeah.
well?
Yeah.
Well, how did that work?
We got help around the globe from people. One of them had a girlfriend. Her name was Patricia Roxford. He took her for a trip along the river, hugged her and kissed her, and declared again and again, you know that I love you. She said, of course. would you do me a favor? Asked the chap. She said, whatever you ask. And he asked for the passport.
Did he love her forever?
Okay, so please join me in thanking Dr. Kfir for taking the time out today.